We're so grateful that you're here. And we know, especially now, we've got a really topical program for you. And I know that we're going to all learn a lot from our two presenters. But let me get started and just let you know who we are and what we do. I just saw that my colleague Graciela Marquina just joined. We are the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. We've been here in the Big Bend area for going on 11 years in January. I can't believe it. And we provide services to all survivors of both sex and labor trafficking. That can mean adults and minors, as well as people regardless of their immigration status, relevant to today. Also, people regardless of faith affiliation or anything else. And it also doesn't have to be someone who's been trafficked like within the last year or 2 years. It could be someone who was trafficked 10 years ago. If we still see, and as we often do, that the trauma of trafficking is a long term event, unfortunately. So that's what we do. We provide care management, which can include everything from housing. We have a housing grant that we work with our partner, the Capital City Youth Services, on, where we provide housing directly to survivors of trafficking, as well as wraparound or comprehensive services to support those survivors. The only way we do it, of course, like you all know, is with many different partners, and two of our most wonderful partners are on this program today. We have lots and lots of events, and one of the things you can do is you can go to, oh, that's okay. We do community education. Do the next slide. That's great, Lisa. Fine, thank you. We do lots of training, of course, and really sometimes we are known as only trainers, but the only way we do our training well is because we provide all that direct care. And Graciela, who I mentioned earlier, works hundreds of hours every month, and does that direct work with survivors. That can include, helping get someone help with legal services or other things. But anyway, we do lots of training, but it's all for the purpose of informing our community so we can all be better and smarter at identifying trafficking and providing the care and support that survivors need, and that we stand together with survivors and against human traffickers. Go on our website. That's our email. If you haven't signed up for our email address, please do. I mean, our newsletter. Give us your email and we will make sure you get our newsletter so you don't miss any of our programs. And before I maybe miss out at the end of the program because we have so much information, let me tell you now about October's event. October's event will be on the 17th, and it will be featuring a phenomenon that we deal with a lot called trauma bonding. We have two experts, including Dr. Joan Reed from the University of South Florida, who is an expert not only on human trafficking and the issues that surround it, but in particular on the mental health consequences and realities that face trafficking survivors. And in this case, understanding trauma bonding, I know that we're all going to learn so much. So if you haven't, you can go on our website. I'll put the link, or maybe Graciela can put. You're one ahead of me, Graciela. I already put the link in the chat where you can sign up and make sure you attend next month, because we know this is one of the most important things we can be talking about. We provide our services free of charge, and really go on our website and explore. Another thing we do is we do a podcast. Our podcast is really a powerful event, because when you listen to them, you'll hear directly from the voices of survivors. It's the only, those are our interviewees always. Stack works super hard to make sure all of our work, information, everything we do is grounded in the voices and expertise of survivors. These podcasts are not, by the way, what you hear sometimes, which is, horrific, horrible stories of victimization. Rather, what survivors do is talk to us about how we can be smarter and know what to do to help people who have been trafficked, or what we can do to prevent trafficking in the first place. So I encourage you to go ahead and make sure you download that as I say, subscribe, rate, and review on our podcast. Next slide, please. We do our work. I don't know how many of you are nonprofits. And if you are, you're probably feeling what we're feeling, which is things are getting tougher. We have just been reauthorized for one grant for one more year only, which we are grateful that we are, but our financial situation is really precarious, as many of our partners locally are. So know that we bring these programs to you for free. And what I would like you to consider at some point is to understand that if you can help, and it could be $5 or it could be $500, but if you can help us, we so appreciate your support so that we can keep these programs alive and we can also continue to provide the services that we do provide to survivors. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is small print, but I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction to our speakers today as well as to the topic. First, on the topic, you can't be alive today and not see that immigration is an issue for us across this nation and certainly in our communities. And I see that a lot of you here are from around the nation. I see people from Illinois, from Mississippi, from Nevada. I think, and of course, thank you for all of you who are joining us from literally Pensacola to down to South Florida, all over our great state of Florida. Immigration is a topic. And the reason we're doing this program and that we have done this program, I think this is the third time that Daniela and Vanya have been presenting with us, is that trafficking, people who are trafficked are vulnerable. And we know the number one characteristic of people who are targeted by traffickers, who are unable to be free, who are who have an unmet need. That vulnerability is really what traffickers can almost smell out, whether that's somebody that a victim may have known for their whole lives, a family member, or someone that a trafficker has targeted and groomed. Um, I've been very concerned about the vulnerability that people who are trafficked as and they are immigrants have been going through. We've been seeing and hearing from our partners that survivors are very much in the shadows and that they're not coming forward for help. I'm concerned that traffickers are seeing so much vulnerability that they might be having a field day targeting people. So it is all the more urgent for us to, I would say, not just talk about this issue, but keep as our sort of North Star the realities that we are here. We're certainly here as STAC to help all populations who are vulnerable and are being trafficked. So, with that, I'd like to start out and introduce Dr. Aguilar. Vanya is a amazing advocate, and you can see her bio here. She's the program manager at the Center for the Advancement of Human Rights here in Tallahassee at Florida State University. She oversees the administrative work of the center, as it says here, but gosh, Vanya, so much more as you have done over the years. And whether you're working with interns or you're directly representing victims of human trafficking and other crimes at the center, where the center provides that direct care to immigrant survivors. We know that you are expert in all of these different areas, and everybody, Vanya and Daniela have assured us they're going to be having a conversation and be welcoming your questions and comments. So know that her expertise around immigration support is vast and deep and has represented, I want to say hundreds. Is that fair, Vanya? Probably, yes, of people. Daniela Donoso, who is a lawyer, is with Legal Services and currently running a very interesting program called the Gun Violence Intervention Project, and you're the staff attorney there. I know that for years you have worked with Legal Services prior to this as an immigration attorney, and after that with another organization doing immigration work. She is just a consummate professional legal advocate. And really, I just have to say, I remember meeting Daniela when you were an undergrad and working at the Human Rights Center. And lo and behold, you went to law school, and there you are as a great success in the legal community and a huge asset to our community. Both, by the way, in full disclosure, both Vanya and Daniela are on the board of directors of STAC, of the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center, and we could not be more fortunate to have their expertise and their energy helping our organization to survive and thrive. So, welcome to you both. I will close out my portion of the program and turn it over to Vanya and Daniela. And thank you again so much for doing this program today with us.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Certainly, it's a topic that is very much one that we work with on a daily basis. We have great partnerships like Daniela with Legal Services of North Florida, the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center, and many others around the community, around the state, and in different states as well. So this is a conversation that it's important to have these days. Before I go on, I want to make sure that I am sharing the correct display. Okay,
Yes, looks
perfect.
great.
Wonderful. So we don't want to waste any minutes. So how about, Robin already kind of introduced us. We're not going to go over that. But if we can go over the topics that we're going to discuss.
Yeah.
Daniela, would you like to walk everyone through?
Yeah, so just a little agenda of what we'll talk about and an insight of the overview. So we'll go over who are foreign victims of human trafficking and kind of define what that looks like, and then what services we know that are available, and more specifically, the challenges that we're seeing and facing specific to immigration relief when it comes as a service to foreign victims, and then the importance of service collaboration and what that might look like in your area. And then we'll leave some time for questions and contact.
Great.
And I did want to go just an overview right now of the gun violence intervention project that Robin mentioned. So this project is specific for Leon County residents. And we know, right, with some of our clients and survivors of human trafficking that they may have encountered gun violence within their victimization. And so this project is not specific to only victims of human trafficking, but it does provide direct legal assistance to anyone that's been impacted by gun violence. So they must be Leon County residents, but the incident could have happened outside of Leon County, and the actual legal issue that arises could be direct or indirect. And what I mean by that is we know with direct victims, it might be directly threatened, right? Maybe by an intimate partner with gun violence. And then an example of indirect could be someone who is being evicted from their apartment, from their home, because there was an incident of gun violence, but they weren't involved. Maybe they weren't even home, but now they're facing this legal issue because of the gun violence. So you also have to meet our income eligibility requirements with legal services. The project does also provide community education on the rights of victims. And then we've organized various legal clinics and outreach with community partners. We do have this grant. It's been renewed for a whole nother year. So if there are any local partners out there that are interested in collaborating in some way or having us, host a presentation or a legal clinic in your community, please reach out and let us know. And we'll have contact info also at the end.
And just to clarify, Daniela and I work for two different organizations. I work for the Center for the Advancement of Human Rights, and we have assisted hundreds of victims of different violent crimes, refugees, and also asylum seekers over the years. I believe that my supervisor is actually part of the audience today. So welcome, Terry. He has been definitely a leader in this field from the very beginning, informing legislator, conducting many different trainings for so many different audiences. So to keep us going, Daniela, do you want to just tell us an overview as to what a foreign victim of human trafficking is?
Yeah. So really to start, so what groups of foreign victims might be trafficked? So when we're talking about foreign nationals, we might be talking about documented or undocumented foreign nationals. So what does that look like? So undocumented immigrants are people who are here without any kind of lawful status. Now, they may have entered without inspection, meaning they entered the country without any kind of visa or permission to enter, and undetected by Border Patrol, or they may have entered with a visa, let's say a work visa, and then they overstayed and now they don't have a lawful status. So there could be a variety of different types of backgrounds that our clients may have depending on how they entered the country, whether they had status before, to know what they're actually eligible for now, as a victim of human trafficking. So we won't get into all the different types of backgrounds, but just so we know how we're defining foreign nationals, that could include both documented, someone who does have a valid visa in the US, and undocumented, meaning someone who might not have lawful status.
Yeah. And Daniela, before we continue, do you mind just telling the audience a little bit more about the H2As and H2Bs and how that actually connects with trafficking survivors? Just
Yeah.
really quickly.
Yeah, so and we've encountered this where, let's say, an employer in the US promises someone a specific job, right? And they go through the process of putting them through the visa lottery system and then applying for their H2A or H2B, and these are work visas. And then once the person travels to the US with the valid visa, then maybe the employer, lied on the application and the actual job that they're now doing is very different than what they were promised. And the issue we see with these visas is that you're not supposed to work for any other employer while you're under that specific visa. So that just gives more to the vulnerability, which we'll talk about more about why this adds to the vulnerability of someone who may be a foreign national.
So, Daniela, just to clarify, we do have a lot of people that come from other countries with a visa already. It's not that they come through the border, they
Right.
come with a
Right.
permission to enter the United States, right?
Right. Right. So living undocumented and why it's a risk factor. And again, these are foreign nationals who might not at the moment have any kind of legal status to be in the US. So as Robin mentioned in her intro, we see people who are living in the shadows. And what does that mean? Meaning you don't have a driver's license. It's an access issue, right? To transportation, to housing. Like imagine all the things that you need to use your ID to access, right? And maybe someone doesn't have that. And the risk of victimization and discrimination, because people are often threatened by ICE, right? They're threatened with being detained. They're threatened because of their lack of legal status in the U.S. and someone who's undocumented may not know what their rights are, or know how they can seek help. We see again how Robin mentioned the increased fear of law enforcement and not wanting to report victimization, because that outweighs their fear of being deported or being separated from their family. And maybe, and we've seen a lot of unaccompanied minors that travel by themselves to the US that may lack familial support as well. And so they don't have a trusted adult or someone they can turn to.
Great. Thank you, Daniela, for sharing
Yeah.
that.
And before we jump into services, Vanya, I did want to point out, I was reading through the notes. Thank you everyone for chiming in of who you are and where you're coming from. So really we have law enforcement victim advocates, we have DCF investigators, there are foster parents on the call. I saw Department of Health, nurses, attorneys. So there's a wide array of service providers on the call today. So again, we won't go into specific of only legal immigration, legal relief. We'll try to talk more broadly. So thank you everyone for being here.
Absolutely. And I echo that. Um, so, talking about services, since it sounds like we do have a big audience that are interested in the kinds of services, how can we best provide services to victims of human trafficking? So, there are different types of funding. Funding, as Robin mentioned earlier, that can be limited at this time. There are certain organizations around the country that are still getting funding through the Trafficking Victims Assistance Program. However, there is a reorganization of that type of funding, and so it isn't absolutely clear. Now, just remember that this is constantly changing these days, and so the information that we give you today may change on the Trafficking Victim Assistance Program tomorrow or next week. And this is why it is good to have the websites where to go to know what kinds of programs um, are available, to know what the names of the programs are. So for pre-certified victims, and what do I mean by pre-certified? That means that a victim or survivor comes to an organization at the very beginning, and they have not gone through the system as a victim of human trafficking, but they do have needs. They have housing needs. They need employability services. They may need assistance with mental screenings or assistance with therapy and counseling, medical care, legal services. And there are organizations that either do fundraising like STAC does to actually cover an array of services that may not be funded by federal grants. And there are other services and service providers that do get some funding to cover some of those needs and services that victims and survivors have. Everything is through Health and Human Services. So it's really important for people to continue to check those resources. Again, this can change in the next few days. We also have different services for someone who is a foreign born national and who has submitted a T visa application or is working with Homeland Security investigations, for example, that are already in the system. They're participating, or they are providing information, or they're witness to an investigation or prosecution of a case. They may qualify for what's called continued presence. And what that is the government is agreeing that they do have very important information on their case, and that while the investigation continues, that the person needs that level of security, right? And so continued presence can come with a work permit. As a result of getting a work permit, they can also get a social security card and, of course, an ID in the state where they live. There is a T visa. T visa is an immigration remedy for victims of human trafficking, whether it is sex trafficking or labor trafficking. This visa is issued for 4 years, and the person can remain in the US for those 4 years. Is a pathway to a more permanent status. So after 3 years, the person can apply for lawful permanent residence. Um, Bona fide determination is basically the case has not been approved fully, but U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services reviews the application and finds that this application is eventually going to be approved. So the person receives a notification, and with these kinds of documents, a person is eligible to receive the benefits that refugees are able to receive. So whatever benefits are within your state available for refugees, victims of human trafficking, who already have any one of those statuses that we mentioned on the previous slide are eligible for those benefits. It can vary from state to state. And so you would check with your Office of Refugee Resettlement to find out specifically what they would be eligible to receive. Those benefits are only available for a certain period of time. And so again, this varies by state. It is always good to check and see what kinds of benefits are available. There are different kinds of resources that are very important to continue to check. These links, by the way, just changed this year, so we had to change them for this presentation. But as I mentioned earlier, trafficking and persons specialist is an office that you can actually reach out to get more information as to what services are available in your area. There is also case management. And again, this varies by region because depending on what kind of grants they have in the organizations that are receiving this kind of funding. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is always good to remember. This is a number that as advocates or people that we work with the victims and survivors of trafficking should share widely, and we should know by heart. I'm sure many of you do. This is the number just to refresh people's memories. The Trafficking Victim Assistance Program also, and so we have the link here so that you can check more of the benefits that they're eligible for. And we want for us to have a conversation. So we
Yeah.
have prepared a couple of scenarios that we'll like to break down and talk to you about.
So
Daniela,
Vanya,
would you? Perfect.
I'll read
That
this one and I'll ask you some questions.
okay,
And then
that
as I
sounds
ask the
great.
questions, yeah, if people want to answer in the chat as well.
Yes,
So this
please
is
chime in.
Median.
Mhm.
Median's mother-in-law, Blanca, promised her that she would help her and her little boy come to the US. Blanca told Median that she was angry at her son for abandoning them in Guatemala. Blanca told Median that she would make sure that her son paid child support once they were there in the US. Blanca bought plane tickets to Mexico and hired a coyote to cross them into the United States. When they arrived in Texas, Blanca went to pick them up and drove them to her house in Alabama. Once in Alabama, Blanca told Median that she had to pay her off a $20,000 smuggling debt. Blanca had her working long hours, would collect all of Median's earnings, leaving her without a penny. She would mistreat Median constantly and tell her that if she did not pay off the debt, she was going to call ICE to have her deported and that she would lose her son. One day, Blanca became very upset when Median told her she needed to buy a phone for work. Blanca became furious and told her that she had no rights here. She coerced her into signing a document acknowledging the debt and stating that she would make monthly payments to pay it off. Blanca also kicked her out of the house and made her believe that the state would take her son because she didn't have a place to live. Blanca made her sign the document giving up her son and gave her son to Blanca. Median was not allowed to see or talk to her son unless she made payments toward the debt.
Yeah. Minor correction. It should say media. Median was not the
that's what I
one
said.
allowed. Yes.
Right.
Sorry,
So
everyone.
with the questions, and then you can go to the questions and then we can go back to the prompts so people can look
Absolutely.
at those. So Vanya, tell me, would you think that she is a victim of trafficking? And how do you know that? So if everyone wants to answer in the chat what they think.
Yes. And while we're getting answers from everyone, I'll go back to the scenario, and we're seeing someone that was promised um, something completely different than the reality she faced when she came to the United States, right? We see constant threats that Blanca was going to call ICE for her to be removed from the United States. She was also threatened that she would lose her son. Blanca never told Medium that she was going to have a debt. right? She owned
Mm.
a medium came to find out about the debt when she got to the United States. It sounds like they made her sign documents and she thought she
Right.
had no choice, and
Yeah.
also took practically her son and was told that if she didn't pay, they would not let her see the son. So they were
Yeah.
holding her son to make sure that she continued to pay a debt that she never agreed to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and all the points that you've said, we've seen in the chat. I've seen people, it's an overwhelming amount of yes, although we did have a couple of no's in there. But that because she was forced to pay, because there was debt, because there was coercion, that overwhelmingly people said, yes, she is a victim of labor trafficking. So
Absolutely.
now that we have assessed that, the next question really is, well, then if she is a victim of labor trafficking, and maybe we do need some more information, but what kinds of services might she need at this moment?
Okay, so it sounds like she may not have a place to live, right?
Mm,
So
mm-hmm.
you would need to look into your jurisdiction, see if there is any safe housing there. It sounds like she also needs help to get her son back. So maybe find an attorney that can represent her with family issues. Um, Looking into what rights she has as a parent in the United States. It sounds like employment. She may need employment. It sounds, we would have to find out, right?
Yeah.
We would need to assess with her what is it that she would like to do. Does she want to stay here in the US? And if so, talk to her about a possible T visa. Does she want to report it to law enforcement? And if so, only with her permission, then we could reach out to law enforcement. And
Yeah.
we'll cover this a little bit more on the collaboration part of our presentation, but it's super important that we have those partnerships built ahead of time so
No.
that when we do have the situations, we know who to call and we know who to reach out to for
Yeah.
different kinds of services.
No, and I really especially liked how you said that, Vanya, depends on what the client wants, right? And overwhelmingly, the chat, said housing and legal assistance, help with employment, and obviously immigration services. But like you said, does she even want to stay here? We can't just assume obviously in this hypo, we're all assuming, but I just like how you pointed out, let's make sure we know specifically what she wants with her time here. So, and of course, Graciela put in the chat that Stack can help. So this is
Yes.
an example of someone who might a good collaboration. So the last question, Vanya, for the scenario, what services then, and I kind of just spoke to that,
Yes.
might be available in your area to help median if she, let's assume that she does want to stay in the US with her son and seek relief.
Absolutely. And I feel that we are actually very fortunate in our area, as Graciela and Daniela mentioned. Stack really goes a long way with um, a lot of the services that many of our clients need, and that they can step out of the box, right? Because there is fundraising that they do. It's not just federal grants, and I
Yeah.
feel that so definitely we would contact Stack in our area, and hopefully other areas have an organization like we do. Again, if the client is willing to talk to law enforcement only if then
Yeah.
we have built partnerships with homeland security investigations, and we have detectives at the sheriff's office in our community. We have also points of contacts at the Tallahassee Police Department. There is a human trafficking task force that law enforcement has formed, and if that is what our client wants to do, then we would
Mhm.
contact them as well. Um,
Yeah.
There are also partnerships that we have, like with Legal Services of North Florida. Legal Services of North Florida also has partnerships with private attorneys if they cannot take
Oh,
cases sometimes.
right.
The center can, and also Legal Services of North Florida is able to represent her if she wants to file a TV's application. Then
Right.
either one of our organizations can
Yeah.
actually help her with that.
Yeah. No, so many. Yeah, you've listed so many. And I just wanted to point in the chat. Robin did, make a great point that this is particularly traumatizing event because the trafficker is a family member in this scenario, right? Someone that Median trusted, that was going to help her and her son, that made these false promises. So we'll definitely we'll need some trauma-informed therapy there as well.
Yeah,
So for the
absolutely.
yeah, so again, we've talked very broadly about different types of maybe services that are available to foreign-born victims, and now more specifically with immigration relief and the different types of immigration relief that might be out there. Without going too much into the nitty-gritty, Vanya, can we move into really what new challenges you're seeing this year when it comes to seeking immigration relief specifically?
Absolutely, Daniela. And thank you, everyone. This topic can actually be a whole presentation. I promise not to get very technical, because we could have hours of discussion in this area with what we are seeing these days. We kind of already mentioned a lot of this, but what are foreign victims of human trafficking eligible for? We mentioned continued presence, T visas, also U visas. U visas are not only for victims of human trafficking, but victims of violent crimes. And human trafficking survivors or victims are eligible for either one of those options with different waiting periods. So we really need, when we talk to our clients, we really need to inform them and let the client actually make an informed decision whether to move forward with these kinds of petitions, taking into account that the waiting periods for these kinds of relief can be much longer than we have seen in the past. Also, there is the deferred action bona fide determination that I had mentioned earlier, that it's when a case is being reviewed by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the person gets a temporary an employment authorization document and temporary protection from the government until their application is fully processed. When someone finally receives a U visa, there are options for family reunification. And I'll give you an example. We have had clients, for example, that have been brought to the United States under false promises. They find themselves in a trafficking situation, and they are being threatened that their children back in the home country are going to face consequences. And this is a constant threat that is very real for many victims and survivors of trafficking. So there is this option of bringing their family members. Depending on the age of the victim, they can have different qualifying relatives come and reunite with them to in the United States. It's a whole process. We're not going to go into all the details about this. This can be a whole immigration training that
Yeah.
if you're interested, you're more than welcome to reach out, but just know that there is that option that actually immediate relatives can actually be reunited with your clients.
Right.
I wanted to talk just a little about the T visas and the U visas because there is a big difference between the two of them. So with U visas, there is this particular requirement that the person must cooperate with law enforcement. With T visas, that's not the case. T visas, if the person shows that there was that willingness to cooperate with law enforcement, there does not need to be a full investigation for a person to submit a T visa application. Both
And
of the
Vanya, for a U visa, for what the requirement you just mentioned, does it have to be a law enforcement agency that they cooperate with, or who can sign a certification for a U
not
visa?
necessarily. We have had other qualifying agencies
Mm-hmm.
that can certify with T visas as well. For example, Child Protective Services can actually sign off on these visas. A judge, if there is an
Mm-hmm.
injunction,
Mm-hmm.
a judge can actually sign
Mm-hmm.
off. If it
Department of Labor.
Department of Labor, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just law enforcement, and it is always good to check the regs to make sure that we have everyone, a list of everyone that can actually sign off. It's always recommended, of course, that you talk to an immigration expert, notarios. Please stay away from notarios when it comes to helping your clients. They may only fill out forms, and many times we have seen that there is more damage than help. So making sure that you do contact a reputable organization, an attorney that actually knows all the ins and outs of these types of visas. I wanted to mention that the backlog quickly because T visas and U visas, there is a different backlog. For now, I'll cover the U visas. U visas can take, if we submit one application today, anywhere between 15 to 20 years for it to be approved. During the last administration, they did a whole reevaluation of this and noticed that this was not very trauma informed, that here we have victims of violent crimes having to wait so many years. So there was a process that was created during our last administration that provided either deferred action or a bona fide determination letter while someone waited to get their U visas or T visas adjudicated. We are still seeing those, not as fast as they were coming before. Um, I'm hoping that after some time of getting adjusted, I guess, through with the new process, that USCIS is going to start picking up the pace again and providing this because this really helps many of our clients to take control of their lives, to feel like
Right.
they are doing something that they want to do. So many of
Yeah.
them really come here
Yeah.
to be contributing members to our communities, and
Yeah.
when they have that piece of paper, it makes a whole difference.
Yeah. And
Um,
we'll talk more about the risks too within that waiting period
oh,
while they're waiting for their status. We'll talk
Absolutely.
a little bit more about that in a
yeah,
second. But yeah, I'm glad you
absolutely.
pointed that out.
So the other difference is both T's and U's, people, when they finally get the approval for either one, they're issued for 4 years. This is a non-immigrant visa. And as long as the person remains in the United States for 3 years, shows that the person is of good moral character, that can lead to applying to a lawful permanent status. 3 years with that status. For T visas, there is an option for early adjustments. However, we have been seeing issues, and CAST is an organization in California that has policy updates and best practices on these early adjustments. And again, this can be a whole training, so we're not going to cover that, but just for you to know that there are resources out there to look into this. So for the T's, again, this is only for T's. The person can actually apply for adjustment after having the T visa approval for 1 year and having lived in the United States for 1 year. Again, there are other requirements that experts can explain to you in much more detail. We also want to mention that the organization that I mentioned earlier, the TVPA organization, they are unfortunately also losing funding. And so as a result, the different nonprofits are not getting the same level. There are also losing funding or having their funding reduced if they have in their proposals or in their grants anything related to DEI. Again, that is a whole nother topic, and it can take a lot to cover and explain. So that's something just to be aware that we need to really work as a community and come together and find other ways that we can actually help survivors and victims of human trafficking. Really quickly, I had mentioned the U visas can take 15 to 20 years to be processed. T visas take a much shorter period of time. This comes directly from the USCIS website, and it says that at this point it's taking USCIS 23 and a half months to process a T visa application. That is what it says on the website. And just see that it says 80% of cases are completed within that period. However, the T visa approvals that I have been getting have taken a little over 2 years, just FYI. We also talked about the increased risks that our clients face, especially these days, because there have been so many changes during the administration. Many of those changes have taken the form of executive orders. There is a lot of information about detention and how everyone has become a priority. Anyone that does not have status. Now, pending status is not a status, right? So anyone that has pending status, I'll give you an example. Someone that has deferred action, for example, it is really up to the discretion of the agent that has encountered that person, whether that agent decides that that person is going to be placed in detention, regardless of having deferred action, unfortunately. And so what do? As victim advocates, we find ways, right? We build those relationships too ahead of time to see how we can help. I know that it can be, we're going through frustrating times, but that does not take from us as a community to try to find other ways to come in together and to really join forces, to find in ways and really step out of the box so that we can actually continue to serve our clients to the best ability and capacity that we can.
Yeah. And sometimes that just looks right now, we can inform, right, about what the increased risks are right now. But driving without a license, it's always been a risk, right?
Yes.
Working without work authorization has always been a risk. But what is the increase now? And something, as legal services, we've collaborated with schools before because they're sometimes on the front line for their students of what does safety planning look like right now, right? We know it's inevitable. People are being detained. And there are increased ICE activity, right? So us as advocates, how do we help our clients prepare for these increased risks? What does safety planning look like? Maybe it's a power of attorney. Maybe it's, hey, find another trusted adult to take care of your kids just in case the worst happens, right? Do you have a document that lists your financial information? Do you have a document with a list of medications that somebody in your household needs to be taking? So is there different emergency contact numbers for your kids at their schools? Who are these, neighbors or other trusted adults that you can confide in to create something like a power of attorney just to be safe, just in case, because we know the worst is it's happening. And then having those resources of the ICE detainee locator phone number, or having again access to, locally, is there an immigration attorney you can turn to? Is there other types of services that could help? But right now it's hard with capacity, and we'll talk a little bit more in service collaboration about that. But um, again, maybe what you can be doing is informing about safety planning at this stage.
Yeah, and Martha has a question about guardianship, whether guardianship is needed. And this is, Martha, this is also the planning, right, that needs to take place with the clients, just to make sure that they have those bases cover. Talking to them ahead of time, the risk of detention, even again with deferred action. I also wanted to briefly cover the risks of expedited removal. So this is something that was also implemented during this administration. Expedited removal has always existed. However, it's expansive now, because now anybody that has not been here in the United States, regardless of where in the United States they are encountered, if they cannot show that they have been here for 2 years or more, they are automatically classified under being able to expeditedly be removed from the United States. So what does that mean? That means that they don't get due process. They don't go before a judge for the judge to determine whether the person stays or leaves. And an ICE officer can actually exercise that order to have someone removed because the person hasn't been here for over 2 years. How about the travels of the risks of travel? That is something that has also increased, and we have been advising our clients to really think about traveling outside the United States. When someone has a T visa approved, they are able to ask for advance parole so that they can actually leave the United States and come back. However, even on the USCIS website, it says that someone can do that, but it's not guaranteed that the person is going to be allowed to re-enter the United States. The person may leave thinking, "Oh, I do have this advanced parole. I have this document that I will have no problem coming back." Historically, yes, but it's not necessarily the case anymore. So we do need to advise our clients about all of those different kinds of risks.
Yeah.
And we come to another scenario.
Another scenario, Vanya. So I'll read this one and ask you questions again. And then again, everyone could put in the chat what they think the answer is. So Marco entered the US without any status. He was trafficked until a close friend helped him flee the trafficker. Marco found a legal organization that helped him file for a T visa. So while his T visa was pending, Marco became eligible for deferred action and was able to obtain a work permit. Marco was on his way to work, and with a work permit, we know you're probably eligible for your driver's license. But he was driving to work and he was stopped by local law enforcement for speeding. Marco was arrested and detained. While at the jail, law enforcement put an ICE hold on Marco after finding out he was not a US citizen. ICE detained him, and his family now cannot locate him. So, Vanya, why, if Marco had a pending U visa, why was he detained? He's a trafficking victim. He's already applied. He has his work permit. He has a driver's license. He has a social. Why did ICE detain him?
let's go back to the scenario. So this are the risks, right? And someone actually asked a very good question on the chat. Martha, what do you think clients with bona fide determination traveling domestically, the risks on
Mm,
airports? That's a very good question. And so let's talk about moving around, right? With this deferred actions, bona fide determination letters. Now, as we covered before, these are not final approvals, right? So technically, the person supposedly is getting protection from the government when they have deferred action.
right,
However, that's interpreted differently depending on who is detaining the person geographically, because the person does not have a final approval. So the
right,
final T or the final U isn't approved. In this case, Marco had defer action, but yet the officer determined, oh, that's not an approval. You don't have status yet.
right.
And because everyone is has become enforcement a priority
Priority.
enforcement for
Yeah.
removal, um, this officer, law enforcement agent, did decided that no, he was going to detain Marco regardless. What
Yeah.
can we do? What can we do as advocates? Well, we really need to again build those
Well, now you've jumped
partners.
to the next question, I think.
Oh, sorry.
Let's see. Well, everyone in the chat, I think, agrees. They're saying because everything, the paperwork is pending, um, and because maybe the status of the application was needed, or it depended on the agency, all the things that you've noted. So at this point, Vanya, what kinds of services might he need, or better yet, what kind of advocacy really on his behalf does Marco need right now?
Well, we need to find out where Marco is, right?
Yeah.
And so many times, our HSI partners are very, very important in this kinds of cases, right? Especially if they have been part of the investigation. And even if they are not part of an investigation, I think that it is very important for us to build those relationships, and also really keep in mind and just remind, don't be afraid to remind people of a victim centered approach and how you might think that this kind of approach is not victim centered. The entire TV program talks about how we need to keep that in mind and just continue to remind trial attorneys in immigration court, judges, anyone within the system, and continue to advocate. Of course, we need to find out where the person is, and from then on, start negotiating with the different partners to see how can we actually get Marco out of that detention center. How
Yeah.
can he not continue? Now, I didn't mention this. There is a new order that was decided by the Board of Immigration Appeals just recently that says that anybody who came to the United States without inspection faces mandatory detention. Again, I know that that's what the BIA decided. However, we're not going to stop at this, right? We're going to continue to find different ways. If your organization is not able to do more, let's find out who can do more, who can take it up to
Oh,
a higher level, higher than
yeah.
immigration court.
Fanya, let me ask you a quick question. You mentioned something so super important to those of us who are working with survivors directly, which is a victim-centered approach. So while we can probably in the abstract say, of course we should be victim-centered, I'm wondering if each of you could give some examples of what would be an victim-centered approach, maybe with Marco here, just so people get sort of examples that they could advocate for their clients.
So if you can type just some comments on the chat, and let's continue their conversation around this, because I am sure that all of you are concerned with certain current policies, new policies, and we are trying to find out ways to better assist. Daniela, do you see anything in the chat?
Not right now, but to Robin's question on how to be victim-centered, you know, um, it's tough in this scenario because we don't know where Marco is right now, but you might be helping the family and knowing whether, if his attorney has already applied for his T visa, then assumingly he wants to be here in the US, right? They've already had that kind of conversation of, okay, something happened, terrible happened to you here. Do you want to stay here? So I'm assuming that that's a yes, but maybe at the moment that he's detained, he doesn't. Maybe once finding him and locating him, he says, I don't want to stay here anymore. I'd rather go back to my home country. And that might be something that the attorney has to help with voluntary departure, right?
Yeah,
So not just assuming that that's the first thing that he wants to do. And increasingly, we're seeing stories of folks who do want to go back to their home countries for various reasons. And
absolutely.
there's a great organization and clinic. I believe it's the immigration clinic at the University of Chicago, but I can look into that. And they started a project, one of the attorneys, immigration attorneys there, on a workbook about what happens after deportation. Because it's a scary word, it's a very heavy and weighted word, right? Deportation. And it's kind of trying to look at holistically what does it look like after you're deported? And they have various contacts and resources in different countries and consulates, depending on, what might it look like to start a new life if you are deported. And I don't know if we said where Marco was from, but I think Miriam was from Guatemala, and just thinking like how to reconnect, how to start working again in Guatemala, who to connect with, different resources. And I think it's an important piece of the conversation that we don't often talk about, and it can be difficult to get there. I know when I first heard about it, I was just surprised that we had never really talked about like, well, what does happen after you get deported and what are the options? Because it doesn't have to be the end all be all. We know family separation is a terrible and scary and frightening thing, and that's it's a case by case basis what that looks like, and making that huge decision to either move back to your home country. So that was something I wanted to point out in that kind of discussion, and thinking about what does it look like to be victim centered in those scenarios, and not just assuming like we have to fight for you to stay if that's what they want, of course, but sometimes it's not. And us as advocates, we have to just, like you said, Vanya, think outside the box and be creative, and just try to be more holistic view of all the possible things that could happen.
Absolutely. Just and being completely honest, right? What does the situation look like? Um, does it look like Marco is after finding him, does it look like he is going to be released, and just continue that communication. I know that in the chat they mentioned the family, keeping in touch with the family. Absolutely, finding out if there are any other organizations that can continue to help the family. Do we know whether Marco is the only breadwinner in the home, and how is the family surviving through this time? Do we know if he has family? I don't know that we mentioned it on the scenario.
Right.
But looking at all of this, so building that community of services for when situations like this happen. As I was mentioning to you earlier, there is that decision from the BIA about mandatory detention. If Marco entered IWI, is he going to be subjected to that mandatory detention? Will he not be
Right.
able to bond out? How
Right.
about how about if he is? And is the family going to be able to come up with the money to pay the bond? I don't know if everyone knows, but in immigration proceedings, asking for a bond, the person needs to come up with the entire amount. It's not a percentage like in criminal proceedings. So if the person is asked to pay $5,000, they need to come up with the $5,000 to post that bond. If it's $10,000, and I've had clients who've been asked for $10,000, $15,000, and they have had to come up with that kind of money. So is the family able to do this? And again, being in touch with Marco and see what Marco wants to do.
Yeah. Great. And then, I mean, we've touched on this, but any services that are different than all the ones that you mentioned with median local services that might be available?
I think that depending on where Marco is, we might want to have another organization, maybe partner with different, because detention centers can be all over the country, right? And
Yeah.
so, as
Yeah.
limited funding that organizations are encountering, my organization may not be able to travel all the way to Texas. So,
Right.
making sure that we have those partnerships with organizations that can provide immigration legal representation there so that my client doesn't feel all alone, because I might not be able to get to my client as quickly as if we had different partner organizations in the very place where that detention center is.
Yeah. And that takes us to service collaboration. So thank you, Vanya. That was
There,
perfect.
yeah.
Um,
Daniela, can you tell us more about the service collaboration that we can
yeah.
actually benefit from all over?
Yeah. So we know, working with this population that majority of social services lack the capacity to serve this population. And now today there might be even more funding restrictions. So what we think about when we think of the lack of capacity, and you can go to the next slide. You can go to the next slide, Fania. Yeah, is for the lack of capacity is there might be a lack of the institutional memory, or access to updated information. Again, specifically with immigration relief, we know policies are changing and updating every day, and it could be difficult to have someone dedicated to only to knowing what's going on. Lack of internal policies or procedures. Again, especially with the funding restrictions and funding updates, your organization might be having issues knowing how to navigate new mandates and things like that, and with serving specifically with this population. And then, in North Florida, I think we're getting better, Vanya, since the last times, but language barrier is always a huge, is a tricky part to capacity building,
Yeah.
Within organizations.
Absolutely. And when we talk about language barriers, is not
Mhm.
only to have someone who speaks that language, but there
Mhm.
are, even with Spanish, that it can be a little bit easier to communicate, depending on where the person is from. They may not
Right.
necessarily have the same understanding. I've been in immigration court in which the judge is from a different country than my clients, and the way that the judge is asking the questions, or the way the interpreter has interpreted the questions for the
Yeah.
clients and
Yeah.
interpreted back to the judge, has been a conflict. And
Yeah.
as knowing what my clients are talking to my clients and knowing how they speak, I have been able to intervene and explain a little bit more. So that can
Yeah.
be a really tricky situation. So yeah, language
Yeah.
barrier
Cultural
barrier is
barriers.
huge.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. No, exactly. Exactly. So what does that mean? What does that look like? We know that we have barriers. So as we've mentioned, service collaboration means working together, right? Here in the Big Bend in Leon County, we have a task force that meets monthly. We've been meeting for almost the past decade, to the Undocumented Youth and Adult Task Force. And really, it's just a space for different service providers to talk about exactly this, the issues that they're seeing when they're trying to serve their clients and how we can work together to overcome that. Because maybe I don't have HSI contacts, but I know Vanya does, so we're good on that, or you know, legal services, we don't have capacity to do, we don't have a therapist in-house, right? We don't have a licensed clinical social worker, but I know I can send clients to Stack and to Graciela to be taken care of. And so maybe there's a task force you don't know about in your area. Maybe there's an organization in your area that's working on these issues that you can join just to hear and share in that kind of institutional memory wealth. And that's kind of what we talk about when we think of that is who are the players, who are the people that are serving this population already, and in what kind of ways, and then how can my organization learn from or use the resources that they already have and build on that. And to remain victim centered, to respect each member's roles in how we do that. From this was a very recent example. Just this week, I was doing an outreach with Neighborhood Medical Center Clinic here in Leon County, and one of the doctors there is interested in becoming a civil surgeon, which is a designated U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services doctor who can help fill out forms. And we know in our area there's a huge gap for low bono or lower price options for clients, especially our refugee clients, right, that have big families to go and see a civil surgeon because there are requirements to these immigration petitions. And, he's a partner that I don't have the skills to be a civil surgeon, but he certainly does. And for him to join our task force and to be someone who we can trust and send clients to is a huge asset. So whatever kind of service background you have, there might be a key element or someone or something that could be super helpful. You can go to the next
Yeah.
slide. So
Sorry.
no. So again, multidisciplinary team, right? Having that case management, having the legal. I mentioned our task force. I know we also have our Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking here in the Big Bend, and certainly in your area, there's an organization like that as well, and trying to bring all of those parties together to be more collaborative. I think that's, Vanya, where maybe first you develop that HSI contact or partnership in something that was a collaborative space, where it's not just a cold phone call and someone's like, who are you? Why should I trust you? How do we walk through this, especially when it's law enforcement partners and we're weary of, how does that affect our clients? But yeah,
I think that we have a quick question. This is with
yeah.
respect to services. Also, it says, where can someone go to find attorneys if someone is detained? Where can the families go? And that really depends on your in the area where you live, right?
Mhm.
Finding out what those organizations are, and even seeing who would provide consultations as well. At the Center for the Advancement of Human Rights, many times we can only provide consultations to people in the community because they don't fall within being a victim of a violent crime, and that is
Yeah.
the population that we represent. But at least provide an idea to the family. Well, this is where you can look through to see if where the person is. Daniela mentioned the ICE detainee locator, and if you type that on Google, it'll come up and it'll ask
Yeah.
for the person's name, for the person's
Yeah.
A number, or
Yeah.
the person's date of birth, the country of birth, to find out what detention center. And from
Yeah.
then on, finding out, okay, is there a Catholic Charities in that area?
Right.
Is there
And
another organization in that area that can
yeah.
actually go in and help?
Right. And I would say too, I mean, you can always look, if you're in Florida, the Florida Bar Attorney Directory will have information, or the Americans, the American Immigration Lawyers Association. They have specific chapters in different areas. But then there are like pro bono listservs, I believe, at different ICE locations. I don't know if they still give that information out, right, Vanya? But they had like lists, or immigration court will give out lists of pro bono attorneys in the area.
Yeah. And I think we have a comment from Angela in the chat that says that this is very important, Angela. It says, we actually have a T client in detention, invalid status, and now has a master calendar hearing.
Mm.
It's something to probably really work closely with the attorney that filed that T visa, right? Maybe another organization, maybe uh, developing those connections with Homeland Security investigations, trying to find out if there are any ways to work with trial attorneys and make them aware. Bringing up again that victim-centered approach, and that the government has provided directions for many, many years. That has been the direction that we have taken, right? That we really need to be consider a victim-centered approach.
Yeah. And then last slide in this, and then we'll go to questions for the last 10 minutes. So staying up to date with changing policies of various government agencies, so important. And Vanya has touched on a lot of this. On HSI, on local law enforcement, DCF too. I know we have a lot of DCF reps today on how to serve unaccompanied minors, and just again with the funding and the things. That's why I think it's important to have that local task force or space where you can go and hear from people in your area saying, actually, we're not under this funding anymore. We're doing this, and these are the new services, and this is how, we can close this gap. I know in our area, we just talked, we had our survivor support committee yesterday, and we're talking a lot about our housing gaps in this area, and how do we create a listserv to make sure we know the partners and the organizations that are already out there doing that kind of work, and how we can make sure, foreign born and U.S. citizen survivors of trafficking have access to housing in our area. So, anything else you wanted to say about service collaboration or staying up to date, Vanya?
I think you covered it. I know we're approaching the very end of the time we have. There's so much to always talk about. So why don't we open it to questions at this point?
That's great. That's great. You all have done an amazing job today. Thank you. You've covered the waterfront on a very, very complicated issue. And I don't know if you saw what I put in the chat about how many times we have seen where people go to quote immigration lawyers, but they have no idea about T visas or U visas. They don't know about the ins and outs of this issue, and can actually do real harm to a client if they don't know what this area of law is about. So please, 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 everyone, make sure if you do look for an immigration attorney to help your client, or that they know about this issue. I have a question for you, and it triggered for me, Vanya, when you mentioned how you've got you've got people who are being assessed for good moral character, and yet we know that traffickers also often force people to commit crimes as part of the trafficking experience. So what happens with that? Have you been able to see success when someone has had a situation of forced criminality as part of their trafficking, and overcoming that kind of good moral character requirement?
Thank you, Robin, for mentioning not just in for our clients who are victims of trafficking. We've seen that comes up also in domestic violence. People are forced to committing crimes, and if that crime is part of either that trafficking scheme or that abuse, we have felt the need that we need to document all of that so that our clients do not face those harsh consequences. We have also been very lucky to work with our psychology clinic here at FSU, and they have conducted psychological evaluations, especially in cases in which we think that that trauma that the person lived needs to be documented, and especially if there are issues that could come up on good moral character, so that a professional can actually make that connection and establish how the person was manipulated to commit certain crimes. I had many years ago a client who was a victim of domestic violence, and her husband was addicted to games, and so he would make her go to Walmart when the games, the games were not behind a glass shelf, and put the games in the baby's bag,
And
and then
just
she
steal
would
them.
go and
So
steal them.
yeah. Hey,
Well,
can you
she
go while you're explaining? Can you go to the next slide that has the CLE info? People
Yes,
are there. We go. Thank you.
absolutely.
Okay, go.
And so we were able to show, and he had subscribed like to games magazines, and so we ended up documenting that through a psychological evaluation, but also documenting that he had an addiction to all of this, with so many copies of like the front pages of the magazine with his name, to show that she actually did this because he forced her to do it. Same thing with victims of human trafficking. They many times are forced to commit crimes.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
I will say legal services has helped with expungements in the past, specifically for victims of trafficking. So if it is something that they're worried about on their record, maybe we could help.
Yeah. Although with immigration, even when
Right.
cases are for
Yeah.
immigration purposes, it will always be there. And
Yeah.
that's why
Yeah.
it's so important for us to document it and explain it and not leave it up to the discretion of an immigration officer that will not conduct an
Yeah.
interview, that they will only see it on paper.
That's right. And as you're talking about it too, it's making me think it's not something to hide. You know, you really do have to talk about it. It can be evidence of the coercion that the trafficker has over the victim, actually. So it can actually, a good advocate would show that to the advantage of the client and to overcome that barrier. Um, this has been a really wonderful program. You've gotten lots and lots and lots of kudos and thank yous. So once more, Daniela and Vanya, you have put together really an amazing, informative program for us to understand what the law is, and really to be good advocates. The only way we get to being good advocates is to understand what the terrain is, how we understand what the rules are, how do we move forward on behalf of our clients and the people we're serving in this really fast changing legal environment. So you all
Thanks,
are
Melanie.
experts extraordinaire. Yes, go
Vanya, do
ahead.
you want to put
Thank
our contact info? I know there's one more
Yes.
slide.
I also want to put a little bit of a commercial in for you. We are constantly wanting to learn more about what you're experiencing in the field. Where do you want to see any information about human trafficking be shared? We can get experts from all over the state and country. And I really would love at any time for you to please just be in contact with me. I'll put my email in there, but I can't talk and type. But really would love to know. It's Robin at surviveandthriveadvocacy.org. It's our website, just Robin at. Please let me know any topics you would like us to cover on our Third Friday programs and work with us. Maybe maybe you're an expert. Maybe you should be a presenter. Thank you, Graciela. So please let us know that we're open to that. And a question just came in. You might wish to contact the USF Tip Lab Bright team regarding the point that we just made about a listserv of resources. This is what they do. Thank you, Liana. Bright is a wonderful resource in our state. Bright Network and Stack is a member of Bright, as well as many on this webinar probably are. And I can put, here is the website for Bright. We will put that in the chat as well. Thank you very much for that suggestion. And yeah, that's one of the reasons Bright is here, is to connect us with. So thank you very much for that. Okay, with that, I will say thank you all very much. I put in the chat too, remember next month October 17th, we will have a program on trauma bonding, understanding trauma bonding from one of the national experts, also at the University of South Florida, Dr. Joan Reed and her colleagues. So please join us for that. And with that, I will say one more time, Vanya and Daniela, you are superb. Thank you for your advocacy and your dedication and your compassion. You are tremendous, knowledgeable advocates, and we love you. And next year we'll have you back again. I know we will because this issue is such an important one. So, everybody, thank you so much for attending, for what you all do to care for and about survivors of human trafficking. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you, I hope, October 17th. Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Bye,
Robin.
everyone.
Bye. Thank
Have a
you.
great rest of your Friday.